Hey, Courtney, how you doing?
Doing well. How about you?
Excellent, thank you. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. We are very excited to have Dr. Courtney McCashland, love that, McCash, as our guest today. She is the Chief Officer of Science and Strategy at AuctusIQ. We have a great title topic, which is apply people-based data-driven learnings to help sellers sell more. We're also sponsored by AuctusIQ, who's a sales performance assessment sponsor of Sales Community. So thanks, Auctus, for sponsoring. And also brought to you by Sales Community. For those that are members, thank you. For those that are not, Tucker will throw up a free link for you where you can go join. Lots of great content and cool stuff on there. By way of introduction, Courtney lives with her family in Lincoln, Nebraska. So like anybody in Lincoln, Nebraska, big Cornhuskers fan, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And Awesome is very proud, has 4 kids, but has one who's a football kicker at TCU. So that's got to be a fun experience. Do they play each other?
They haven't.
Okay.
So,
All right. So that makes it, avoids any conflict there for you. So,
definitely.
So I've had the pleasure of working with Courtney over probably at least the past couple of years, but she has a PhD, and she is for sure the PhD when it comes to talent assessment, sales assessment, and just really kind of in the weeds of kind of everything that we're going to be talking about today. But a lot of companies just kind of miss and take for granted what really are the true attributes of the star performers, or these days as things are evolving, kind of having a handle on what the future attributes are to make sure then that you're kind of hiring and recruiting to that criteria. And then for the people that you have on your team now, making sure you're assessing to that, so that way then you can be moving people up or out, or kind of coaching to that accordingly. So we'll be getting into more of that, but she's been just fantastic to work with. So I've enjoyed it, Courtney. Thank you so much. And to help with introduction, I've got some of her AuctusIQ partners with some content for me as well. Tim Geisert, who's the CRO, says she cut her teeth in the early days at Gallup and worked with Don Clifton to build out what is now the Strength Finders product for them. So in many ways, she's been at the forefront of the development of positive business psychology, which is a study of what's right about people versus what's wrong about people. That'll be great to get into. Very few people in business today have done more studies and researched the traits that explain success, not just in the sales profession, but all jobs across the market, and some in sports. Last year, she completed a research project to understand women in sales and what explains success for women. So we'll definitely be getting into that as well. And then from Troy Canner, who's the CEO and also a partner with you. On a personal level, he says she is a marathon runner, a concert violinist, a psychologist, and mother of 4 children. So you have many hats going there. So really good. And extremely well educated as well, undergrad from USC. And then University of Nebraska Masters in Qualitative and Quantitative Research, and then PhD at USC for Organizational Leadership. And after that stint of a lot of years of being very educated, then your first job was actually as a CMO in Palm Beach at Lydian Trust.
Yep.
Nice. And how was that?
That was kind of a fun gig. That was like right when the internet became a big deal, and we were the first de novo startup branchless bank. So it was a wild ride. I learned a lot. I was kind of thrown in. We started at 30 people, and in 18 months, we're at 1,700 people and just growing like wildfire. It's kind of fun.
Awesome. That's great. And then if you can briefly tell us about your impressive career from there.
So I wanted to get back to Lincoln, Nebraska, because my family was ready to come home, and took a job at the Gallup organization, where I was really heavily influenced by Don Clifton. So real big believer in positive psychology, and my passion and purpose in life is really understanding what is right about people. So, and how can you measure it so that you could help somebody get into a vocation and a job, a career track where their natural talents and gifts really align to what they need to do to be excellent. And so started there, was really involved with a book called First Break All the Rules, worked on what creates engagement in the workplace, And after that, when some of my colleagues left and started a business, it became Connexa. So they asked me to come join them there, and I led the assessment practice. And then IBM came in and acquired our business. So I was the president of science and strategy for IBM Smarter Workforce. And that's where I really, the whole inception of Auctus, of what is it that we can do to help go really deep in the sales organizations to know why do some people succeed where others fail. And so we spun out a suite of assets from IBM and started AuctusIQ, Troy Cantor and I. And at that time, really just nobody had an end-to-end offering where you could use assessments to hire, onboard, train, and then really track improvement for sales and sales leadership on the things that drive commercial success.
Wow. Awesome. Really cool. So you already touched on it. Anything more you want to tell us about AuctusIQ?
So Auctus is really unique, and we kind of were ahead of our time. So we're a performance-based assessment system, but what we're doing is we're really getting underneath those natural patterns of behavior, those talents that explain why some people succeed, as well as we've gotten really deep on the competencies. So what do you learn to do at every step of the selling cycle that helps you either, move forward or move backward in advancing an opportunity to close? So we've learned some things really interesting at Auctus over the years. We've done more studies where we had information about the people in the sales organization. So we had their assessment results, but we also had their last 3 years of performance in the job. So we've refined the predictive models. So the questions and the weighting and why some people score differently, that perform differently. So we can use the assessment or that predictive model to make smarter decisions about who comes in and know they're going to perform like your top 20%. And then really specifically where they need career development, training, where they need coaching to get to their optimal performance. So this talent record is really the differentiation. And then we've created reports for that talent record plays at every point of your selling career and as you advance into maybe more senior roles.
Awesome. And before I forget to ask, there's a lot on the sales side and I'll say the professional side, but you guys have done some amazing work in the sports area, including NFL football.
Yes, and it's interesting because actually it was a while back in my career that I got really involved in sales. I also saw a big opportunity in athletics and started a business called Showcase, and we looked at soccer and football were the two areas where we looked at what's different about the coach and what's different about the player that creates that great team athlete. And there's so many parallels to sales. So the things that you look at a competitive athlete who thrives, their natural DNA, like how God made them, are a lot of the same talents and behaviors that explain the success of individuals who are just the best, the rainmakers on a sales force.
Awesome. And you probably have to be careful with some names, but there's been some amazing stories where you have what would otherwise be maybe kind of underperformers coming out of college, but you're able to kind of look at your assessment and your traits to say, okay, if you judge a book by the cover, they may not be strong, but if you peel back the onion, so to speak, you knew that they're going to be top performers. And then you've had other situations where somebody's maybe an amazing lineman and seems big and fast and everything else, but kind of, underneath it all is not mentally there. They get drafted high and then they fail, which you in hindsight knew that they were going to fail. Can you talk any more about those?
So, yes. So just to give you a little context, when we do our assessments, you have online questionnaires that you can ask questions that put you into moments of time or situations and that look at your natural talents and look at your competency. So we also have interview guides. So we ask open-ended questions, and what we've studied is what do the best people say and do differently. And so those responses, we can hear a variation response, so we know what the best will say, so we can use that kind of criterion to score, do you have these natural assets, these natural talents that help you? So we do that in sales, and we also do that with individual professionals in athletics. So we've done a lot in football, where like I kind of cut my teeth. We had some individuals that are at Division I level, and we did those insight interviews with a lot of the Division I athletes that when we tracked to see who made it, who went to professional athletics. And one of my kind of all-time favorite interviews, I got to interview Rex Burkhead, and this was when he was at the University of Nebraska, and just just blew off the cover of the interview, like had all those natural talents and spades that you need as a team athlete to just be like one of the best. So his mental game just totally differentiated him. But interestingly, when he went to the, NFL, he wasn't the biggest guy as a running back, but he performed at excellence. And a lot of it's like what you have, your mental capacity, your mental edge. And you see that mental edge differentiates professional even more than at a collegiate level. It was just interesting.
Amazing. So jumping away from sports back into the sales and the professional side of things. So what gives AuctusIQ an advantage in building data-driven learning plans for sales organizations?
So it's really the database of the questions that we ask. So it's not just like over time we've done so many studies where we knew what the person brought in terms of their talent record and then how they perform. So we've refined which questions and what scoring algorithm is able to predict who's going to be the best. And the reason that matters is that everything we measure is anchored in what explains success. So if I hire up against it, I can bring somebody in who has the right goods, but then I also can give the coach or the leader, the manager, what they need to get the individual seller up to optimal performance faster by giving feedback and coaching that leverages their natural strengths, but more importantly, like identifies what they could be doing where they might have some skill gaps. So things they haven't learned. So the manager can be cognizant and help manage that. So you get a little coaching brief so that you can give that information quicker. So that talent record, the fact that it's anchored in what drives performance and can give really specific feedback to the individual and their manager, and then ties into training where those gaps are, is really the big differentiation in the offering.
So give me, sounds fascinating. I've seen it work, but, kind of what would be a couple examples of you kind of doing assessment or interviewing somebody and then identifying some, kind of or some gaps or some low performing areas that they have that they need to up level?
So we had an organization that was a large food manufacturer that we've worked with to really like shift their performance curve through their talent over the last 5 years. And they went through a major transformation, kind of going from more of a product to a solution sale, and now more of an advisory kind of sale. And what we've done is at the time of hire, we have our modern profile, what you need for future state, that gets at what high performers bring that are really exceptional within each of these roles. So we were able to inventory and do an audit, see a baseline of everyone in their organization. And then they've been able to hire more like those individuals who are high performers that are also bringing kind of the talents and skills they need of the modern profile. We've been able to model that and hire new people coming in who match that, and then develop their current people in terms of how they're coached and how they're trained up to that level. So they've really shifted their strong matches against the profile, and they've just gone off the charts in terms of their performance year over year. So just had exponential growth over time through the talent of their organization.
Yeah. So say at a rep level, right, tech sales, what would be kind of maybe one or two kind of specific examples of kind of some of those areas?
So one of the ones that you'll see a lot right now is that organizations need, on the talent side, you look at someone who's is a natural advisor. So they bring in, we're seeing some of the changing talents are learning agility, which is you have that intellectual curiosity that you want to go out and get information and really understand your customer's business so they are intimate and can truly provide recommendations around the business. And then another natural talent is that advisor teacher, where you want to actually help someone, coach them and help them understand what they can do to improve their business. So those are natural talents that the average scores have gone up on our benchmarks and that you need to hire for. Then what we've learned is on like individuals in terms of getting better is once they kind of understand what they can do well, is we'll look at teaching and advising as an example of actually a competency you can learn. What do you need to do that when that buyer or your customer is stuck and doesn't know what to do, that they'll come to you for advice. They'll come to you you become that trusted resource. What are the specific things you do to build proficiency so that you have that knowledge base and that you know the plays to run so that you become that resource? So for each of these, we have like a game plan. You have a playbook that teaches you what you need to perfect in terms of skills to build that competency. And teaching and advising is one we're seeing a lot of. We're also seeing like navigating the deals, a big one in big companies, is knowing how to understand not just the buying process, but knowing how to align all the different influencers around that common commercial strategy so that you know who you need to lobby and how you need to get them on board to move the sale and actually close.
Wow. So without talking to the managers, which typically a lot of these assessments, it's a 360 and, kind of all that. So just completely talking with the individuals and have them do the assessment, you're able to figure out what those low performing areas are, and then have a readout to say, okay, here's what the low performing areas are, so that between you and then the manager can then help to kind of coach the person to be able to improve in those areas.
Correct. And the difference is, and we've all done different kinds of assessments, right? So a lot of assessments just get at your patterns of behavior, like your personality or DNA. And the difference we have there is everything we've built is based on what success for sales looks like and questions that will get at the differences. But the other thing is we also break out and measure your skills and competencies, and we put you into moments in time that are critical when you're selling, that you have to know what to do and what not to do. And we've studied like what are the actions that are taken, or what are the decisions that are made by the seller in those moments that lead to performance. So it gives you really concrete data. And when you ask the questions, it's not really clear. There's not just one right thing. It's like a scoring algorithm around what the best do differently. So it's a lot more predictive and a lot more useful for our customers.
Yeah, just amazing. And then obviously same thing would apply then for sales leaders, and kind of wherever you go in the food chain, same process. Some of the attributes may be similar. A lot of them will be more kind of leader, management strategy centric, correct?
Exactly.
Oh, that's great. So you mean these days there's obviously a lot of you hear, I think every sales organization is going through transformations, point product to solutions to as a service to leveraging AI to be more consultative. Why do you think the shift?
I just think the buyer demands have changed, and then the selling cycles become more complex. So what the buyer wants from a really good salesperson is they want them to really be experts, and they want them to be someone who's getting really deep in their business and is helping them solve their problems and get better. So they don't want someone who's just coming up myopically pushing one offering. They really want them to be looking more holistically at the customer. So that means that the modern profile of what the person needs in terms of talent and competency has shifted. So we're seeing even the go-to-market changing. So people are trying to figure out, what are the people in my organization doing that readiness audit? I can see, where are my people today against what we need them to get to? And it becomes a leading indicator just to manage your talent to execute on your commercial strategy, so that you can know with confidence that you're not just guessing. It takes the guesswork out of that. I can shift my people over to where they need to be ready to perform in this new arena that we've defined.
Wow. So I mean, it sounds very basic and obvious, but the old premise of you're only as good as your people and your team. So whether you're a first line manager and it's your reps, or you're the CEO, you're president of go-to-market, being only as good as your team, I would think that anybody that hears about this would be kind of all over saying, wow, we got to go do this because we can do so much better. But people don't necessarily wake up thinking about that.
Right. And I think there's been a big shift in the way organizations are implementing training. So we have a natural advantage because we have that talent record. And we also, we look at where you see a picture of where somebody's at today. But then remember, your skills and competencies change over time through training and development. So we track with our clients, not only where are you, but we update that talent record based on what you've acquired in terms of new skills, new strategies, new techniques that let you sell more. So when a customer works with us, they get that readiness map. Then they go and they do their work. They go and coach and do their learning strategies. We link into their LMS and pull all the best in class training into the record. So you have that individualized plan, a personal plan on your learning journey, and your manager's coaching and putting it into your expectations. But then you come back annually with your manager and you look and see how you've improved against some of those critical competencies for the job that you're in. And what happens is that reinforcement really drives behavioral and skill change that is directly aligned, because it's all anchored in your commercials. So your whole organization is rowing together to really drive that commercial outcome.
Wow. And it seems like, I'll say, 20 years ago, say, 30 years ago, kind of performance management, having those discussions, having things in writing was kind of table stakes, right? You do it all the time. It would be, a frequent happening, but it seems now culturally, a lot of companies have kind of gotten away from it. Managers, think of it, okay, hey, it's more of a, hard discussion, or it's going to be a conflict. I want to avoid any conflicts. So I would imagine, leaders must love the fact that you're able to kind of arm them with some of these data points that then they can help lean in with their, the people that work for them around these development areas.
Definitely. And if you think about it, on your team, if somebody's just not hitting quota, they're not getting it done, you're having the same conversation every time, but you don't know why. You can see when you look at the results, they're not hitting their quota. That's obvious. We can see that you're not winning the deals. You're losing it at some point in the selling cycle. But now what we can tell you is why and give you a path to help the person improve their results. So it's a conduit to the outcome, but it gives you insight, and you didn't have that visibility to the person to be able to uncover like what's getting in your way of success. So now it gives like, it's not just a guessing game. It gives the manager an idea and understanding of what we need to work on to like improve those specific techniques, because you can see where in the selling cycle you're losing it, and you can see what competencies you're lacking, because they're basically a step you're not doing something you need to be doing differently, and understanding client needs, or delivering the value proposition, or negotiating the deal, or aligning your influencers. So each of those you have to do at excellence, and you can kind of see it then clearly.
Wow. And then just to give you a commercial, the kind of three main offerings that you have are Talent IQ, Sales Manager IQ, and Performance IQ, right?
So you have, I always think about it the simple way, like going back to the athletic, you have the players and you have your plays. So the player, that talent record is giving you insight to your talent, because you've got to understand to individualize to your people everything you're doing based on who they are. Then you have a visibility of the manager on how to coach them based on who they are. So every time your rhythms and cadences around coaching, you have individualized approaches to just do that smarter and better. And then on our deal IQ side, you have visibility into the plays you need to run to accelerate performance. So it shows you based on each of your opportunities where you're getting stuck, but it brings it back to the talent record with recommendations on the next play that this person should run to win. So it kind of looks at the human being and then what they're doing to drive performance. And that data comes back into the system. So you're getting that constant feedback, like the full loop on what is your strategy to lift commercial performance.
Ah, great. And I should have mentioned before, so anybody that's watching or listening, feel free to post any comments or questions. As always, we got Tucker behind the scenes able to help us and pull those up. So please feel free. So moving on, what does a company need to do to align their talent strategy for their continued revenue growth?
So the thing that I don't think most people realize is it's so critical that you measure the right stuff. So if you're using any kind of measurement, assessments or anything, and you don't have 100% confidence that the scores on the questions and scores are directly correlated to individual performance, you're better off with nothing, because you could be reinforcing activities and time and behaviors that aren't leading to performance. So the biggest thing is you got to make sure you're measuring what matters when you're going in and putting it in place. But the other thing is giving utility to that. So giving feedback in a way that you can use that information for the purpose that you have. So a report that helps you if you're trying to make a hiring decision, a report that helps you if you're trying to coach. So each of those things kind of line back up to the commercial. So you're just reinforcing those same behaviors and skills that are directly driving performance. So that everybody kind of is aligned then on the commercial strategy.
Oh, great. And we have a question from a LinkedIn user, and I think I remember this conversation, so I'm going to guess it's Rick Diana. He asked, "Hi, Courtney. It was a pleasure to meet you last summer in Manhattan, Randy's event, fantastic Greek restaurant. I utilize Clifton's strengths with my clients, and it's been a game changer for my talent management practice. Some, but not all, are sales professionals. What's an ideal client for you?"
An ideal client was like any organization that's going through transformation with their people and needs to understand how to line their people up with their commercial plan. Interesting. I remember meeting, and I also, just to share a little bit about that, we with Strengths Finder, I actually worked early in my career. I think Randy mentioned this with Don Clifton. He was a big mentor of mine. And if you think about with Strengths Finder, it's kind of ranking order your 34 natural talents. It's comparing you on those patterns of behavior, and you're picking kind of which one you're more like. Yeah. So it gives you that idea of like what bubbles up at the top. So you want to leverage those leading strengths because those are your kind of secret sauce or your secret weapon. We do that specifically to what matters for selling in the role that you're in, so that you're really doing it more aligned to the role that you're playing in that sales or sales leadership role. But it's the same concept. You want to leverage your natural areas, and then the areas where you're lower, build strategies. And that's kind of the whole positive psychology. So it's kind of it's not only enlightening, it's inspirational, because you don't have to fix all your broken stuff. You have to just manage it so it doesn't get in your way of success.
Gotcha. And then thinking about this with the kind of the gaps that you find, are there challenges in getting people to change?
I think it's really hard to get people to change behavior. So that's why it's really critical that you have an ongoing sustained strategy. The place that you can get change easier is on the skills, because we see people change 40 and 42% change time 1, time 2 in a 9-month period on skills. Your talents, those behaviors, you really want to just learn how to apply who you are. So the big strategy that's important is measuring skills. You want to do reoccurring measurement every 9 to 12 months, and you will see significant change in the techniques, strategies, and ways people go about selling. And that's what we're trying to impact. And interestingly, that change is explaining more of the variation in commercial performance at an individual level than even the talent, which people just don't realize. It used to be more just what God gave you that made you be the best seller and the rainmaker. You still need certain stuff to work with to make it into the game, to be a player on the field. Right. But to have the skills are what's differentiating somebody who is the consistent superstar. So we can teach you those things, and we can see those skills, those scores change by significant amounts over time.
Yeah. I mean, I've got maybe a different story a bit, but I remember different companies I've been at, but especially at HP, I went in, we're under, kind of big sales transformation, do more sales calls, be more aggressive, kind of learn, be a sponge, share best practices, enemies outside, not inside, et cetera, et cetera. And sort of part of my 90-day plan, I came up with, okay, hey, here's what a top performer looks like. So if you're crushing your number, but behaviors are bad, your numbers are good, but you're not somebody good long-term. If you're somebody who you're maybe short in your numbers, but having all the right behaviors, love you. So here's the behaviors that we really want everybody to have. And we're going to be coaching and developing to that. And in saying it, which I would do kind of in different audiences and everything else, like there'd always be people where you could tell their body language. Okay, but if you don't like this is where the train's going. But if you don't like this, just kind of raise your hand respectfully. You can exit. You can find find somewhere else. But just know this is what we're doing. This is what we're driving. So if you don't like that, exit. And I was always amazed at how many times you could kind of get those people to exit who otherwise had been kind of hidden in the organization. And it may take 6 months of a 3 or 6 months of a performance development process to get them out, but they just opt out and go. So the more bold and direct that you can be around, that this change is happening, that ultimately there's always going to be some percent of the population that just say, I don't want to change. Right.
Yeah. And I think when you look at I think studying success is the key. Because if you understand what's going on in the current organization with people who are exceptional, and you know what that modern profile is the future, and you can figure out how to model and replicate that just by moving people up through training and development. So our readiness map on the x-axis looks at where their readiness is against the profile. So it gives them a score. And then on the y-axis, what you're getting is how are they performing historically. So you can see people who are consistently performing, who bring what they need, and then you can figure out their strategies. And you can just mirror those, and they work. You can bring more people up the curve in that way. So it's like you said, it basically, some people will weed themselves out if they don't have what they need for future state because they haven't been successful, and then they understand why. They modify, they move into a different role, or you change kind of the criteria of what you're asking them to do. Maybe they are a great farmer, but not a good hunter. So they have some of those they just can't go get new logos. So you can modify a little bit their accountability as you morph the business if you understand their natural talents and competencies. I just did a study. I was just going to share this with you, Randy. About we just got data back from we work with the company, one of our customers who's got 7,000 plus sellers, and we've been working with for a long time. Another organization, kind of a really strong brand. And it was interesting because we do studies over time with them. And this group that just came back, this is a pretty typical thing that we looked at their top performers and their top performers net average competency. These are those things you've learned during the selling cycle, was at 1.7 times the individuals in the bottom 20%. So that we see huge variation in these companies between, it's almost like you've got kindergartners on one side, and then you've got like people who are, seniors in college on the other in the same classroom that you're training. So huge variation, which shows you need individualized learning plans because people have different gaps and they're all over the map on their competency proficiency. So we saw this 1.7 times the top to the bottom. And interestingly, over time, we saw that the high performers that we had measured at the beginning, they had originally 1.27 times in terms of their productivity on quota attainment to the bottom. But over time, it went up to 4.21 times the top group. So those individuals who are most developed, most competent, and also like the best match on our profile, over time, they can be performing, 4x the people that aren't. So competency is explaining so much of this variation in performance that individuals just need a path on how to get there. And we just need to be really unique in how we give feedback and give them the relevant training and development so they can actually, sell more.
Absolutely. I found over the years, you're always better off. A lot of times people let their A players be A players, and then managers or leaders spend, I'd say, too much time kind of coaching the B's and C's. And I'd argue the opposite, which is more time that you can spend with the A players. You're going to get a bump of productivity in your kind of financial results. Plus, You're going to do much better with retaining those A players because they're being coached or being developed, and A players help recruit A players, right? If everybody knows, okay, hey, your sales organization are B and C players, people want to go there, right? If they're known A players, and more people want to go. So spending time with those A players pays huge dividends, which I see a lot of companies not doing.
Right. Exactly. And then also that people don't have the discipline to keep going. So we just did another study where you looked at groups who just measured and remeasured on the assessment versus people who measured, coached, and aligned and remeasured versus people who measured, coached, and offered training, individualized training, and remeasured. And it's just astronomical the change you see in competency. So just by measuring the right stuff, we saw a change. The group improved by 13%. So just by focusing on it and having measurement and remeasurement. The second group who went through, they had the coaching. So the manager met with them and gave the feedback, and they had something to work with. So they had a focused, targeted coaching conversation. They remeasured, they improved by 64%. And then the last group added in a targeted module around the gap areas so that they had training in directing to their gap area, and they improved by 95%. So, and this was over 254 people. So you see that when individuals have kind of all these pieces aligning to what drives commercial is when you get the results. And the group who actually improved were focused on an area of kind of like filling up top of the funnel with generating opportunities. And they added $500 million in pipeline through the improvement on the competency. So it's just crazy how when you align it all and it's anchored in commercials, you can move the needle on your outcome through your people.
Absolutely. And although you've kind of touched on this, but what are some of the top priorities for success?
So the key, as we've talked about, I think before, is that frontline sales leader needs to be educated. They need to know how to have smarter, better, faster performance coaching conversations. And the piece of data we give them with the playbook and the coaching briefs gives them the insights on how to do that. But they still need to be trained so they can master, because that if they can master that technique and be really better performance coaches with their people, they can drive and accelerate through their talent the outcome. So we partner with Sandler, and we've worked with a lot of training companies, best in class across over the years. And the thing I love is Sandler has the best frontline growth series training. So when we can put our talent record in with the Sandler growth series, with the training and teaching. It's like coaching for success is one of the modules that you put that in place along with then that insight about your people, and you can change the organization. So I'd say one of the big tickets is that frontline manager being educated. And then the second big ticket is that we have those links directly from the assessment and reassessment that goes right into the LMS to that best-in-class content. And again, we've done this tightly woven experience with Sandler with these personalized learning paths. That's just such a great experience because you have that, and then you still have the instructor-led, but it's for targeted areas, for groups of people who need a deeper dive. And everybody's getting better, and the people who need specific areas of help, they're getting it. They're not being forced into a class one size fits all that doesn't meet their needs.
Yeah, what I find with Sandler a lot too is the huge need and gap in the first line manager training. So it seems like during COVID, to retain top sales reps, people would be promoted up, or people just had kind of been there, so they just kind of keep them there. But really, kind of that training, and I argue those first line sales managers are really the ones that really run the company. So if you can get them sharp and crisp on the coaching and developing and kind of everything else, there's huge dividends. And that's I think one of the biggest gaps if you look at who needs the most talent coaching.
Right. Correct. Agree.
Works out well. So you've also done a big research project last year about women in sales and what explains success, which is very, very obvious to me. But what did you learn?
So there's one kind of aha across. We did interviews with 50 plus really exceptionally successful women who had thrived in sales and kind of even moved into sales leadership roles, and they were superstars in their company. And every single one of them had like a critical moment where they had leaned in and they had gained exceptional confidence in a certain area that allowed them to like build their confidence and really shine. So one thing that differentiates women is that they had a need to kind of like through some area of competence or really specific core deep subject matter expertise is how they gain credibility to go kind of win the game in some of these opportunities. So we saw that as a constant in our sample. But here's a really interesting fact that we saw. So we saw, if you look at the stats, you'd think, oh, all these places, women are coming into the workplace and you're seeing, more equity in terms of the number of women and men in roles. Well, it's been a flat line in sales. In fact, when we go into big companies that have 7 and 10 and 15,000 sellers, sometimes only 10% or 15% are women.
If they're lucky.
If they're lucky. And so we just actually did a great big study with a large organization, and it was a technology company. And it was so interesting because only 10% of the total population who completed our assessments were women. But of the women, we also had performance data on everyone. And it was interesting because in the first year of the data that we collected, women's average revenue was 89% higher than male. And then the second year, women's average was 132% higher than men. So they were outperforming, but such a small underrepresented group. So it's interesting. I think this competence area and having to prove it out through some of these competencies is where women are, when you get up into like the leadership roles, that their scores are higher on some of those competencies. But really the raw talent you need, it doesn't matter what your gender is. It just doesn't matter. It's just learning how to individualize and use your strengths and then figure out what you need to, the knowledge and the competencies you need to be able to differentiate and win. So it was a really cool study. And I just feel like it's an opportunity for more women to lean into the profession.
Absolutely. And I don't want to get in trouble here, but if I make a general statement, I think just the EQ in general with women just is so much better, right? So instead of being a bull in a china shop, just being able to kind of just, navigate kind of what to do and how to do it.
Yeah.
So you're not going to let me get in trouble there. So thanks. So,
there's an interesting thing there because we have from our past, we have perceptions of what women and men are good at, but you'd be surprised. There's a lot of men who have a lot of empathy, who have great individualized perception, which is a very predictive talent. But I think it's because we've been cast in roles and some of those talents, you lean into what people historically believe we should be in life. So, but if you really get into it, the talents that differentiate high performers are completely blind to what your gender is. It's just that, some people who get into a profession, like some of the rainmaker courage and competition, You might have had, kids playing sports younger, and maybe there was more males, and so they got into sales. But there's women who are just as competitive as men in sports, and that are also just as competitive when they're selling. So it's just, we have these perceptions, but it's interesting when you look across, like we had, thousands of individuals that we on the talent record, and those natural talents, there's a big difference between the high and low performers. There wasn't even, it was a point difference on average on the talent scores between women and men. So it's just our perception of what women and men do typically,
Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of times people, I get asked and they say, well, how can we get more women in sales? And they try and just cultivate the women that are there now. And I would argue you really got to go back to the college ranks and say, okay, here is a great profession. Women can be great at it, because for whatever reason, kind of just doesn't work that way. So if you can get the pipeline going and cultivate it in college, then I'd argue, companies need to take a long-term vision, but then they'd be so much more successful for those that are leaning in on those, for sure.
Yeah. We have a large financial service company right now that we're working with, and what they're doing is they're just trying to make sure that they have a talent record using our assessment to go and look at jobs outside of sales and invite people who fit the model of the profile, regardless of their women and men, to come in and apply for the sales roles. And that's how they're getting more just, people, diversity across the board on people who are just a good fit for the profile. And more women are being invited to go through and take the assessment and go through the process. So it's just a way to kind of expand and have, a more equitable way to look at your workforce and get people into sales who have sales talent.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a comment. We just need more women in enterprise sales, or I'd say sales overall, for sure. And then here might be an interesting idea for you, right? So if you think about being able to identify those men that are more empathetic, EQ, sympathetic, maybe you could do a deal with Tinder, and that could kind of help identify those that then could be potentially better partners. But we can take that offline. And what else did I want to add? Oh, so last question here, unless we get any others from the audience, but you've been at the forefront of the development of positive business psychology, which is a study of what's right about people versus what's wrong with people. Kind of briefly tell us more about that.
So my inspiration really started back at my root when I started at Gallup before I even did my undergrad, my master's, and I did my doctorate through a cohort at Gallup. So everything around positive psychology. So the belief that if you can understand what a person does naturally and spontaneously, and if you can measure that, and then what's key to the role, you can get people into roles where they just do spontaneously what drives success. And that's such a beautiful thing to the business, right? Because you're not trying to force someone to be someone they're not. Think about your best salespeople. They're authentic. They're authentically who they are. If you try to take somebody who's low in courage, persuasion, and force them to have that really hard conversation, they throw up. I mean, it's like you can't go against what someone's natural grain is. So positive psychology, I think, is the best way to go with any kind of performance assessment, because what you're doing is you're just aligning what God made them. Because if you think about someone, kids, really little kids, you can see this. If somebody's disciplined, if they have courage, if they have empathy, I mean, you can see it when they're 5, and that just gets stronger over time with reinforcement as an adult if it's a positive behavior. And so that behavior is so ingrained that if you're going to try to change them when they come into your workforce, good luck. It's a lot of work and you don't get a very high return. So we're just trying to align. Positive psychology is aligning your natural gifts that help you be great at certain things into doing those things so you can reach excellence.
Wow. Fantastic.
It's kind of fun. Yeah.
Awesome. So could keep talking forever. So on that note, Courtney, you've been an awesome guest. Thank you so much. For those that want to hear more, go check out AuctusIQ. And Tucker, thanks for your help behind the scenes. And everybody, it's all about up-leveling, upskilling, not only yourselves, but those around you and those that have yet to come into your companies, your organizations. So everybody have a great week. Courtney, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Take care.